Let me make a start and thank you for attending. I want to welcome specific individuals this morning to the meeting. Joyce Redfern, Sue Davis, I don't know whether Councillor Hugh Davis is here, and Sarah Fulthorpe. They are members of the Recovery Board and they've come in to listen. And can I remind Cabinet members that we'll stay back for half an hour after the meeting to have some discussions with them. I also want to thank all the people at the back for coming and attending the meeting. And I want to make special reference to somebody who I first met 45 years ago, Iqbal Chowdhury from Lanthanum Road. Yes, I want your indulgence for just 1 second. Iqbal is known by the Indian community in Torvine as the father. And I first met him on the formulation of Bangladesh when he threw a party in his restaurant when they installed the then president, Sheikh Mujib Rahman. That's 40 years ago. Welcome, sir. I salute you. Right, here we go then. On to the business proper. Attendance is going round. Then we need to go to apologies, which there's none. Declarations of interest. I've got a declaration of interest, and probably the most serious one here. I won't be able to take part in the discussion on the school because I live right opposite. I've been advised by the monitoring officer and the legal officer that I should not stay in the room or indeed get engaged in the discussion. Can you confirm that and any other declarations, Linda?
Yes. Thank you, Leader. Yes, you have what we call a personal and prejudicial interest, which means you're not allowed not only to take part in the debate or the decision, and you must physically be outside as well. There are other interests, and I've had discussions with members as usual. And item 7, which is, I think, where your interest occurs, so that's the 21st century schools and the removal of surplus places. The other ones that we've discussed, and I'll go through them for the more efficient running of the meeting, and members then can say agreed as I go through. The Deputy Leader has a personal interest only, which means, of course, you can stay, take part and vote in the matter, because you're a council-appointed trustee of Torvine Leisure Trust, which has a lease of the adjoining Fairwater Leisure Centre. So we declare that.
I totally agree with that interest.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Then Councillor Richard Clark has a personal interest as a local authority appointed governor of Crossacaileog School, which is also affected by the proposals. Again, just a personal interest, Councillor Clark. Okay, that's fine. And Councillor Hunt has a personal interest again as a local authority appointed governor of Llantarnam School. And actually I notice we have another councillor in the public gallery. That's Councillor David Daniels, who's also a local authority appointed governor of Llantarnam School. Although he's not part of the cabinet or making a decision, the code as written says that if you're in a meeting of the council, you need to declare that. So I have spoken to Councillor Daniels, and he would want to declare that interest. Thank you. So that's item 7. Then I'm going on to item 8. This is the next school report for, and it affects 3 primary schools. And there are 2 interests. I think, Councillor Morby, you're an LA appointed governor at Llantarnam Community Primary School. And then Councillor Gwernira Clark, this is a personal and a prejudicial interest. Again, you will be outside because you have a granddaughter who actually works at Ysgol Panteg. Fine. I think that's it. As ever, if there are any interests that come up as we go through, please ask for advice or make the declaration as necessary. Thank you, Leader.
Right, thanks for that, Linda. On now then to item 4, which is the minutes of the 25th of March. We'll go through those page by page. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17. How many of these are there? Page 18. Page 19. Page 20. 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. 26. 27. 28. 29, 30, 31. What has he done?
We're on to the reports now. I think it's down to page 24. The end of the message.
Yeah, I don't know what has happened here, but they've changed the system, Richard, and it's creating confusion. Right, shall I go through all these and finish them?
It's down to page 24.
Well, that's not up here.
That's the end of that report.
Yeah. Have members got the same as me on the sheet? Are you doing the same as me? Okay. I don't know what have happened here, but they've introduced a new system onto this. We haven't, no members have had sight of this. I'll go through them. I'll continue to go through them. We'll have to go right the way through the...
That's you're on the reports now, Leader. That's not the minutes. So.
Right, hang on then. Where's the IT man? Ah, here we are. No. Where's the IT man? What do we buy on here? Issue. I'm down now to agenda item number 4, which is the cabinet minutes of the 25th. Of, we're going to have to go through these again. Right, here we go. Agenda item number 4. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. It's not 4, it's 11.
Yeah, it's okay. That's right.
Page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, 17. That's it. Somebody move the true record?
Move.
Good, thanks. All show? Thanks so much for that.
And then you've got the minutes the 1st of April.
Right. Agenda item 5 now then, of the special extraordinary meeting of the Cabinet of Torvine. Here we go. Page 19, page 20, page 21, page 22, 23. Somebody move the full record?
Move.
Show. Thanks so much. Action sheet, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. They're there for members' information unless members have any specific questions.
Right, thanks. Any questions to the Chief Executive? If not, then we're on to item 7, and it's at this point I have to leave. And it'll be taken over by Lewis Jones, who's the deputy leader. Over to you, Lou. Okay.
Okay, we'll have a presentation from Dermot McChrystal and John Tushingham on removal of surplus places in South Torvine. Members will recall that about 6-7 years ago we had the same procedure in North Torvine, where Trevetting Comprehensive School was ultimately closed. So hand over now to Dermot to take us through.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. The paper that you have in front of you, the purpose of which today is to look at the outcome of the consultation that we've recently had on the removal of secondary school surplus places by the 31st of August 2015. Council will already, or Cabinet will already know that Council committed itself in November 2011 to look at this consultation, and in November 2013 it was agreed to move forward with the proposal by consultation with all interested parties. So the consultation really focuses on the closure of both Fairwater and Lantarnham secondary schools, with the opening of a new school on the Fairwater site. So the paper you've got in front of you goes through in details what we've done by way of consultation, the parties that we've talked to, and list the responses, the nature of the responses that we've had. The consultation period ran from the 17th of February to the 31st of March, and in 5.2 and 5.3 you can see who we've talked to and the type of responses that we've had in from which bodies, and lists the 200 individual responses we've also had. You have a copy of the consultation response paper as one of your appendices to the document. I think the key issue for us today is to really look at 5.6, which details some of the key reasons for proposed alternatives which have come through in the consultation, which I think would be useful to go through one at a time, and to pause after each one, Chair, if that's okay, just to ask for questions and invite comments at that point. 5.6 really, what we're trying to do is to cluster the key themes coming through in the consultation responses, to allow Cabinet then a time to look at each one in a little bit of detail. So that. Oh, sorry, yes, of course I can. Okay, so the first of these was the creation of a newly formed school on the Lantarnham site rather than the Fairwater site. Obviously, the original proposal from Council was to close both schools and open a school on the Fairwater site. The Fairwater site has been identified as the preferred site because, although it's the most costly option, and that's an important point, it will cost more to actually make the provision on the Fairwater site. One of the key themes within the consultation was that we wanted to make sure that the school was located at the heart of the learners, of where learners lived. And in the document you'll see in the appendices again, as part of the catchment review, that we've actually mapped where the majority of learners are. Fairwater is the most central location for the majority of learners in the new school. Lantarnham would not be. So even though it's a more expensive site, we continue to believe, as part of the central tenet, of course, the consultation, we said it would be where the school should be at the heart of where learners are, that Fairwater is the correct site to choose on that basis. And that is, of course, a key theme within the 21st Century Schools programme in any case. Chair, is it okay if I stop at each one and just invite any comments, or would you like me to continue and do them all?
Yes, by all means, I will do it. But like I say, I referred earlier on to Trevetting Comprehensive School. You know, lots of us are governors at schools, and we all know what a huge part schools play in the community, and the commitment of governors, pupils and staff to the schools is absolutely fantastic throughout Torfaen. As I say, I was a governor at Trevetting Comprehensive School for about 20 years. I was chair for about 15 years, and we all fought hard to keep the school. But, you know, we knew with falling pupil numbers, the subjects being taught were not as great as they could have been, you know, because as surplus places arise, you know, you get a fall in the number of subjects that can be taught. So it's something that we got to do, but we do it with a heavy heart. But I'll hand over now to Brian.
Chair, you raised an important point, and I would point out that in the consultation document, I should highlight that parents in both schools actually did themselves already understand and identify that there's been a reduction in the curriculum offer in both schools. And that is something that isn't acceptable, and we know we need to do something about it very quickly.
Yeah.
So that all learners get the best possible choice of curriculum and the best delivery of that curriculum as well. So I think you're right to highlight that. That has come through. Moving on to the next point, in terms of progressing secondary school reorganisation, once the future of post-16 delivery in Torvine has been settled. It's probably worth just reading this out. This would provide greater certainty, which would aid planning of the changes. At this point in time, however, there is no time frame on the decision to move to the tertiary system. So this is really about post-16 education. We don't, as of this moment, have the clarity we would like to have about a post-16 site. And that's something that we're very much still working with the Welsh Government on, in terms of looking how we can get to a solution that to that issue in as quickly or as short a timescale as possible. But we don't know how long that's going to take just at this point. Clearly, we'll keep any changes that we make today under review in terms of that discussion with the Welsh Government as well. So, again, any questions, Cabinet, on that particular point? In which case I'll move on to the next one. Waiting for the work on the Fairwater site to be completed to avoid pupils being taught on a building site. The key point here, I suppose, is if a decision is made early enough, we can look at the refurbishment beginning as quickly as possible. We have got experience already of operating building projects on school sites that are already operating. So there are a number of ways that we can actually tackle that, either by, as it says, quarantining, which is an unfortunate choice of language in some ways, but it simply means keeping a safe, portioning off aspects of the school site so we can keep children safe and keep workers safe on site as well, and keep the public safe. And we could also look... Okay, I'm getting through it. Work might even be completed before the additional pupils arriving. So depending on the scheduling of the decision and how quickly we can get on with the build, there are a range of options that will make sure, as an absolute priority, safeguarding is our number one. So we will make sure that all children, workers and visitors at the site are safe. So we know from previous experience that we can actually manage that quite readily. And the contractors that we use also have got lots of experience. All the contractors who may tender for this have got experience in terms of actually delivering these types of projects on active sites as well. Notwithstanding, however, the need for continued use of Lantarnum buildings by the newly formed school would be kept under review as well. So there may be some option to look at using Lantarnum as a stopgap measure if that were absolutely required. As I said, safety for everyone is a priority in the first instance.
Grenada Clark would like to come in.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Leader. I just need you to confirm something. You just talked about being ready for children, if we agree today, to move into new school. You seemed a bit unsure as to whether we would be prepared. What I wouldn't want to see is anyone, you're pulling the face there, I need you to tell me that we will be prepared to accept children into the new school, but I wouldn't be happy if they were in porta cabins or so disrupted they couldn't get on with their education.
And I suppose the reassurance I'm trying to give is that we know that we could continue to use the existing Lantarnum site to make sure that there wasn't a need, A, for any risk. So safety would always be the first priority, and B, safety isn't just about physical or emotional safety, it's also about safety in terms of education. So in terms of ensuring that that children get no disruption to their educational provision, we would also look to use the Lantarnum site if we needed to, so that it's physical, emotional and educational safety I'm talking about, and we would not want to use porta cabins if we could avoid it. By having the Lantarnum site available to us, we know that we can avoid it. So I hope that gives you the clarity that you need.
Councillor Anthony Hunt.
On that specific point, I see from the consultation document and also from other conversations I've had that one of the suggestions made was using one of the schools whilst the other was made ready. So you're saying that on the balance of things, you don't think that's desirable, and I'd just like a bit more sort of detail on what the reasoning was there, really.
I think what we're saying is, depending on the timing of how quickly we can move, there should be sufficient site within the Fairwater site to accommodate all pupils, and we may be able to advance those works in time not to require the use of the Lantarnum site or any other sort of fallback position. What I'm saying is there are some unknowns at the moment. Our contingency plan includes the continued use of the Lantarnum site if we needed to. We wouldn't want to do that because obviously that incurs costs, etc. That we wouldn't need to. That we would want to avoid, but that provision is there, and that the provision, so the revenue is there for us to use that site if we need to, but we shouldn't. We're aiming not to need to use that.
Councillor Dave Yowell.
Yeah, I'd like to take you back just a couple of sentences, although it is a significant year or relevant year as well. It's the notion of curriculum development, because it seems to me that there's an inference in something you said earlier on, or an inference could be taken, that separately the curriculum choices might very well be damaged. And of course the reverse of that, the implication is the reverse of that, would benefit curriculum development. First of all, can you confirm that that is the case? By joining these two schools together, there would be a wider choice. Curriculum development would be at the top of the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, that is the case. We want to look at, in fact, one of the things that we've already agreed with both the governing bodies and head teachers of both Lantarnum and Fairwater, and this is going back some months, we agreed that we'd come together in May to look at the curriculum choices and development programme over the course of May to get to a point where there'd be an implementation plan for a single delivery of curriculum available hopefully by the end of May, certainly early June. So I've already, again, in the last week, have a discussion with both head teachers about getting that date together in the next sort of few days, really, to start mapping out that process, and that is one of the clear aims that we want to get out of that. Both schools currently are also facing some significant issues with staffing in key and core curriculum areas, so we also want to look at how we can support both schools in the short term and potentially in the medium and long term with staffing structures that fit with that curriculum as well.
Surely the two are inextricably linked, the staffing and the curriculum development. So it seems to me that what you're saying is the sooner we agree, the sooner we can move on, the sooner some of these substantial and fundamentally important issues can be resolved.
That is absolutely the case. The curriculum determines so many things in the school's life, timetabling, lots of them in shy of school life, but also absolutely the staff complement and who's best placed to deliver what. So we are currently exploring, in advance of the decision, in advance of if the decision is yes today to go forward, there's still a further consultation period, a statutory consultation period, obviously. But we can't wait for that, and both schools have already agreed that we should look to work together now in order to get the best outcomes for children, to look at that curriculum planning and to see what other potential staffing benefits they may have in supporting each other in the short term.
Okay, I don't think there's any more questions. Dermot, if you want to carry on with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Variance, so I'll just put this to the top of the screen. Variance in the level of proposed capital investment for Crossy Killiog and the newly formed school on the Fairwater site. I think there were particular concerns within the community and across the piece, really, about the proposal for spending what seems to be significantly more, which it is, £36 million on the Crossy Killiog site, and why there would be a lesser spend on the proposed site at Fairwater of £6 million and then a further £10 million in Band C. And really, it's a very straightforward answer to that. If we could refurbish Crossy Killiog School, then we would do it. The nature of the construction at Crossy Killiog means that that isn't achievable because of to make, and I'm no technician, so I'll try not to give a technical answer, but in order to make significant changes in remodelling the school, you'd actually end up pulling most of it down because of the way that it's built. It doesn't just lend itself to refurbishment easily. So we have no choice other than the school is in such dire need of change. The only way for us to cost effectively do anything is actually to remove the current building and put up a new one. If we didn't have to do that, we wouldn't do it. So that really is the answer to that. And Fairwater site does lend itself readily to refurbishment, which is why the costs are significantly lesser, although it's still £16 million over the Band A and Band C investment. So again, Chair, I'll just pause if there's any questions there.
Any questions to Dermot up till now?
Now, one of the things we have to do when we're looking at changes of this nature is obviously to look at the catchment areas. And again, there's a full sort of explanation of what we're doing both in the consultation document itself and in the response to the consultation. But in summary, adjusting the proposed catchment areas to equalise socio-economic mix in both schools. We don't accept that the socio-economic mix is unequal as described by some in the consultation. We have looked at the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation in some detail, and the differences there aren't as stark as was sometimes being made the case in the consultation responses that we had. So while it's possible to look at the variance in proposals such as moving Thornhill into the Crossy-Keeliog site catchment and Lantarnham Oakfield into the newly formed schools catchment, that would come back to the core issue about trying to keep pupils in the centre of their population. So there is a compromise within any proposal such as this. What we think we have found is the best compromise possible, without creating significant inequality in terms of the catchment areas. So there is a little compromise, there has to be. We can't please everyone, but that's the best compromise that we think we can find without causing significant disparity between the two catchment areas. And again, Charles, I'll just pause there.
And come to your answer, Anthony Hunt would like to.
Just a point first on that. The one sort of set of statistics that goes against that is the free school meals data from the catchment areas as published. And I know there's sort of two arguments here. There's the school of thought that suggests that we should try and equalise free school meals sort of data and sort of deprivation data across schools. The other school of thought being that we shouldn't necessarily try to equalise that data, but we should target resources towards the schools that have the biggest challenge in terms of deprivation. And I just wanted your thoughts on that. But thinking, going back to point 4 as well, if I may, Chair, there's sort of two sort of challenges there, are there not? There's one, that the challenge of the reality of that situation, saying if the council could refurbish Crossy, then it would. There's also sort of the perception challenge there. And I might say a bit later, if I'm allowed, in sort of when we sum up the sort of the challenge that gives us to sort of build a vision of whatever happens from here on in, that people see that there will be equal outcomes, even if the inputs aren't equal. But do you recognise that that's a sort of a key challenge for us going forwards?
Okay. Thanks for that. I think that's a critical point. We want all of our schools to be good schools in terms of what we want to see in every class. We want teaching to be good in every lesson, in every classroom, in every school, every day. We want the quality of leadership in all of our schools to be good or excellent in the next 2 to 3 years. So in terms of our aspirations for any new school, it has to be the same high aspirations we have for all of our schools, and we know, being in the position we're in terms of special measures, that we've got some distance to travel there. So very much looking at the new school coming forward, we want to set the highest aspirations and put the support structures in place. Obviously, we're aided in that this week with the news that several of our schools, including Lantarnum and Fairwater, will be part of the Schools Challenge Wales programme, and we'll see a significant additional investment. We don't know all the detail of that yet. In fact, we're meeting with the Education Achievement Service this Thursday with the head teachers and I think the chairs of governors from those schools to look at what that programme and that additional funding is going to mean. But from Council's viewpoint, clearly we want to make sure that regardless of what what funding that schools have, and whatever pupils they have coming in, be they have free school meals, or as the case quite often, entitled to free school meals but not taking up free school meals, which sometimes can give us some disparity in terms of the data, that we set very high expectations for children and hopefully for parents as well, to bring parents with us in that journey, and for all schools. So I think, fundamentally, what we're signalling to the whole community is that we want to really refocus on what we accept as being okay for Torvine. And okay for Torvine isn't adequate in terms of outcomes for children. It clearly has to be good and then excellent over the next sort of period, and that very fundamentally has to be part of our vision for the new school. So in terms of the free school meal data and the difference between the Wales Index for Multiple Deprivation, issues such as although you're entitled to free school meals, not actually taking them up can mean some significant differences in terms of what the stats look like. Both schools, though, have been recognised by Welsh Government as needing additional investment to make sure that we narrow the gap for pupils who are at risk of not attaining, and that's something that we're working with both governing bodies to really focus on, regardless of the decision today, but hopefully the decision will be yes. But either way, we'll be focusing on that with both schools in any case. Thanks, Chair. So, really, that's what we're trying to do in very short order is summarise the contents of the consultation response document that you have in your pack. I do think it's worthwhile as just looking at the risks associated with this issue. If the specific proposal is not developed from the findings of the consultation, then we clearly will still have significant surplus places. In fact, that situation may deteriorate. It's important just to remind ourselves that some of the issue about surplus places is about, obviously, the changing population within Torvine, but it's also the issue that Lantarnum lost many, many hundreds of pupils going back to a school in Newport. So our issue isn't going away. It's something that we have to report on. It's something that's important in terms of the different sort of inspection regimes that we're subject to. And obviously we want to make sure we're getting the best value for learners in Torvine. So if Lantarnum and Fairwater School remain open, the position is likely to become unsustainable. We haven't used that word lightly. Not only will school finances be in difficulty, as we've already said, the standard and breadth of education offered at each school will suffer, and parents have already recognised that. At least some parents and respondents in the consultation have recognised that's happening already, so this is a critical issue for us. So if we don't continue, then clearly, in terms of agreeing the decision today, secondary school closure is not progressed. It will not be possible to raise the full amount of capital funding either required for the 21st Century Schools programme. And that may also cause us some difficulties in terms of planning elsewhere for some of the other parts of the programme that we're looking to implement. The key actions coming out then, if I can just move to those. If the recommendation is to proceed today, then we will move forward to publish statutory notices. That means there's a further 6-week statutory consultation period. So a paper will come back to Cabinet following that for a final decision to be made and to determine the proposal at that point. I hope we've impressed upon you, that we've covered, we've had a very thorough consultation process. There was very good engagement from the wider community, and particularly from parents in Lantarnum, and that we feel we've also responded to all of the key points raised in the consultation, and our recommendation remains that we should proceed today. Thank you, Chair.
Before I bring the other members in, could I make reference to, there was an overview and scrutiny committee. Would you like to refer to that?
Yeah. The views expressed by overview and scrutiny is it worth, because it's not available on screen, just if I read these out? So the question was whether the recommendations for removing surplus secondary school places in the south of Torvine are in line with the 21st Centuries Programme investment criteria. And the committee's response was, in two parts, the committee cannot offer its full support to the recommendations for removing surplus secondary school places. The committee requires more information regarding whether there are other potential options for reducing secondary school places in the south of Torvine. And specifically, a second point then suggests that a feasibility study for a more radical solution to reduce surplus school places, investigating the merits of a single brand new school for the whole of Cwmbran. Our response to that is we feel that we have actually given quite detailed information in terms of the first point to the committee and to Cabinet and Council and the community about why we need to proceed on the basis that we have outlined in the consultation document. Would point out that if we were to stop at this point and look at a feasibility study, that would take some time. To put it, that could take some considerable time. The outcome of that feasibility study may be that we still proceed as we've already outlined. We don't have agreement from Welsh Government. We'd have to go back to Welsh Government and renegotiate with them, because clearly we've been talking to Welsh Government throughout the whole consultation process and leading up to the to our submission of the 21st Century Schools programme as it currently is. That would require us to go back to Welsh Government. And as we've already said, we've used the word it's not sustainable to stop. We've had issues now for our learners in school today that we need to get on with in terms of looking at that curriculum offer and its delivery. That is not something that we can afford to wait. We have to act. This would require us to stop. I think that's incompatible with the needs of learners, and we'd be failing them if we stop and slow down at this point. So I think that would be very difficult for us to agree to.
So, in the end?
Just on that point very specifically, I also have my concerns about that suggestion on the basis of, do we have a site that would be big enough for what would be by far the biggest school in Wales? It would be nearly 3,000 pupils on one school, which I wouldn't be comfortable in any of the three existing sites, would mean closing two schools and therefore would be, more difficult rather than less difficult. And just as a father of a young child, I don't know if I would be comfortable sending my child to a school with potentially 3,000 young people, including potentially a junior school on the site and a special needs school on the site if it was Crossy Killiog as well. So I don't think I can personally support that suggestion going forward, because I think it creates more problems and concerns than it solves.
Councillor Dave Young.
Yeah, just picking up on that point, I would be a bit concerned about that for the for the reason that I commented earlier on. One of the major concerns here for me, and I'm sure for everybody else around the table, is that we get right in place this notion of curriculum development. If they were to be a super school, then we're talking about a time span that extends, it transcends past anything that we've had our mind set on currently or our minds engaged in. And the longer it takes to construct something, even notwithstanding the comments of Councillor Hunt and the weaknesses that he was identifying, the longer it takes to get something firmly established, the longer we are in terms of ensuring a proper curriculum development plan for the kids that will ultimately be housed in the school. Because the big question for me is not necessarily whether or not a super school is viable, but whether or not we can afford to risk the education of our kids whilst we are waiting for something like that to mature. So I would have great difficulties in supporting that particular issue. But something that occurs to me as well, what would you do, for example, to answer this argument, and I'm sure it's a perception, but perceptions can be really important to those people who hold them, that the current plan to build a new school at Crossy Killiog and to refurbish one of the two existing schools, either Lanternum or Fairwater, is likely to set up this kind of distinction between something that is good on the one hand and something that isn't so good on the other hand. How would you answer that?
To answer the super school is an interesting turn of phrase. Schools are super because not because of their size, but because of how they deliver to their pupils, I would argue, and what outcomes their pupils get. So size of itself doesn't mean it's good or bad, I suppose. But the point is well made already that the complexity of designing a school for that number of pupils, to look at the site, just site surveying, looking at all the issues then about the usage of that site, how we would construct such a building, going back to Welsh Government, I think would cause significant delay, and as I said, may not result in us being able to proceed on that basis anyway. So in terms of the feasibility study for that alone would take some significant time, and I wouldn't be able to give you a guesstimate of how long that would take, but I think we're talking about some significant months at the very least. I don't think we've got that time. In terms of the answer to Councillor Yole's question about the difference between the two schools and the perception of the differences, again, we know that the refurbishment of Fairwater will be to a good standard. There's always been some significant investment, as the committee knows, in terms of all of our secondary school sites, in terms of 21st century schools, technology upgrades. This will enhance further what's available on the Fairwater site in the first instance, with a further £10 million, making sure in Band C that will be made available to make sure that the school is viable for another 25 years, and that will be looking at plant and so on. But the first £6 million will really give a significant shot in the arm to the school. The critical answer, though, is again about what outcomes we achieve from our children. And what we're committed to doing with all of our schools is to make sure that the quality of what they provide and the outcomes that our children achieve are the key focus of the discussion that we have with the community going forward. As a school, as a local authority in special measures, our focus has to be on how do we raise outcomes for all of our children in a sustainable way across all of our estate, and that we empower the community to ask us those tough questions about how are we doing, is it good enough? And for us, I think, going forward, we have to ensure, we want to ensure, and we will ensure that all of our secondary school provision and all of our primary schools as well are providing that quality of education. That has to be where we shift the focus of our discussions around schools to, in my view, and we'll be able to do that in what we achieve on the new site at Fairwater. And I think that's the best way for us to reassure the community that we're delivering for them and their children.
Okay, any other member wish to comment? Oh, sorry, Greg.
Thanks, Chair. No disrespect, colleagues, but so far this has been a very unpassionate debate, and this actually is a passionate subject, and I think we need to inject a bit of passion into it, because closing schools is a very emotive topic. It worries parents, it worries children, it worries staff, and we don't want to cause that worry, but at the same time we want new schools, we want better schools, and that's the whole purpose behind the Welsh Government 21st Century Schools programme, to actually give our children across Wales better opportunities to improve their education outcomes. And sometimes you have to take the tough decisions, the unpleasant decisions, the unpopular decisions in order to get what you want, which is a better school system within Torfaen. Now, it's an accident. It hasn't been a design, but the next item on this agenda is the announcement of investment of £21 million in 3 new schools, 3 new primary schools. You don't get that unless you take the other measures, which is to make more efficient use of resources, to get rid of surplus school places, and to actually, in the course of that, provide better premises, better facilities for our children. And that Welsh Government initiative is one which in 2010 we enthusiastically embraced. There was a Cabinet meeting in October 2010 which set down the principles on which this 21st century programme would be based. We talked about, at that stage, Some new schools in terms of new builds, some new schools in terms of remodelling, some refurbishment, obviously some closures because we needed to rationalise the school stock to make better use of our resources. We talked about schools being sustainable and ICT rich. We talked about being of the right size in the right place. We talked about fewer transport costs, fewer travelling distances, more children able to walk to school than currently, and we talked about, inevitably, community use of those schools, which is something which we would like to see more of than we've had in the past. Now, the total cost of that programme at that stage was £280 million. That's what we put our hands up in Cabinet, in this room. 6 of us were on Cabinet at that time in 2010. At that stage, Welsh Government were going to fund 70% of the cost, which meant that our contribution would be £84 million. Subsequently, we know what happened. I'm not blaming anybody, but we had austerity measures introduced. And in February, March 2011, we went out to consultation on the sorts of projects that would be pursued under the 21st Century Programme, knowing that we were in difficulty in fulfilling our original programme. And actually, we came up with some savings as a consequence of re-looking at that programme. Following consultation, we had consultation all over Torfaen in March 2011. That included not only the massive investment suggested for school buildings, it also talked about the transformation of post-16 within Torfaen, an integrated post-16 centre. It also talked about digital learning, aspects on which we've made great strides. Some, unfortunately, post-16 education, we're still waiting for the college and the Welsh Government to agree, hopefully with us, on what is the best solution and to provide the funding for that. Now, because the contribution from Welsh Government as a result of those austerity measures was reduced from 70% of the total cost to 50%, we found some savings so that the total cost reduced from 280 million to 257 million, but our contribution to that had to increase from 84 million to 126 million, round figures. So, that was the problem we were facing, and that meant that that reinforced the need to take some really difficult decisions, to get rid of some of the surplus places, to make sure we were efficient as we could be in terms of provision of schools. Now, in Council in 2011 approved a slightly revised programme, taking into account those additional costing requirements and the difficulties of being in austerity measures. The same principles which applied in October 2010 were maintained in the new programme agreed by Council in November 2011, and it specifically said in relation to this particular proposal that one secondary school had to be lost in the Cwmbran area through the closure of Llantarnam and Fairwater and establishment of a new school on a site to be determined with a modest initial remodelling cost of 6 million. So the proposal we're now debating whether or not to endorse was approved in principle by Council 2.5 years ago. So let's not pretend it's a surprise or unexpected. This has been on the cards for 2.5 years at least. Now, there are lots of issues arising from the consultation. I think most of those have been addressed. We've had comments made from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, some of which are surprising, frankly. I don't know where they've been in the last 2.5 years, whilst we've been taking forward this proposal. Why they should bizarrely come up with a proposal to build a single new school in Cwmbran is beyond my comprehension. But they make a good point in respect of the intrinsic link between secondary school provision and post-16 provision. We do need a resolution to that particular issue, and it's being suggested by the Scrutiny Committee that we should engage in a conversation with the Welsh Government. Well, in fact, we've been engaged in a conversation with the Welsh Government and others for months and months, years and years on this particular subject. So we are trying to get a resolution. We know what we want, the college know what they want. What we've got to do is persuade Welsh Government with the college that the particular solution we're looking for, a post-16 integrated centre in Cwmbran Town Centre, is the right answer, and that will inform the development, if that decision is made in good time, of Crossy Caerleog School, of the new school on the Fairwater site. The issue about what we do if we don't have that certainty, if we can't get our plans going as quickly as we would like, does need to be taken account of. Dermot has already referred to the risk of the building site at Fairwater whilst work is going on to improve and extend that site, that we may have pupils in the area. Although officers are confident that we could manage that successfully, as we did when Yscol Govan Gwynthlew was remodelled, the view of my view is that we need an amendment to this particular set of proposals to ensure that politically we take responsibility for ensuring that we don't have those risks. And therefore I'll be moving an amendment to the effect that delegated powers be given to the Executive Member for Children and Young People to enable the retention and use of the Llantarnam site, if needed, on a temporary basis in order to safeguard pupils during the building work at the Fairwater site. So I'll be moving that as a formal additional recommendation or an additional decision, I suppose, of Cabinet, obviously subject to the usual processes of scrutiny and so on. I think the only other thing in relation to the views of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which Dermot didn't get round to referring to, probably because I intervened, was the question of catchment areas of the primary schools. There isn't a precise configuration of the catchment areas between the feeder primary schools for the new school at the Fairwater site, and we need to address that. But in fact, because one of those schools which is new is Llantarnam Primary School, which is covered by the next item, we can look at that particular issue under that heading and look to see what the catchment area for that particular school should be. So I'll be attempting to deal with that when we come to item 8. Other than that, I simply want to repeat that this is something that we've been planning to do specifically and generally for the last 4 years. We've got a fantastic opportunity now to actually improve the education facilities for the children of Llantarnam and Fairwater. We can do that at a more reasonable cost than building a brand new school, but that is sensible too. It's sensible to spend money wisely because we've got £128 million to find over the next 10-15 years in order to complete the programme which we came up with in 2010 and 11. So, colleagues, I urge you to support this proposal, to be bullish about it in the sense that this is actually doing something which is going to improve the education chances for our pupils, and that we should be proud of what we're doing, particularly as we can show that, in fact, results are coming in terms of new schools built for our children as a result of the measures that we're proposing to take today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any other member before we go to Redmond? Gwynaela?
Could I just say, Deputy Leader, the amendment makes me feel a lot easier with it, because what we wouldn't want to do is to have our children literally trying to be educated in what can only be described as a building site in progress. So I'm pleased that you've made that amendment. I would support that.
Anthony?
And yeah, I'd similarly like to start by welcoming that recommendation as well. And I'd also like to just start a couple of comments, if it's okay with you, Chair, with an apology of sorts to Brian and his officers for the amount of questions I've fired at them over the last few months. I'm sorry for, I'm not sorry for asking awkward questions, but I am sorry if you're bored of the sound of my voice. Obviously, my position as an LEA governor at Llantarnam makes this an issue which is particularly, sort of sensitive to me. So I would like to make a couple of sort of comments before asking sort of for further reassurance in a couple of areas. Obviously, the Cabinet report and the consultation response, and we've gone through today a number of the specific points that were raised. and they've also been raised in letters and emails to us as members. I think they both show on the surface that the issues that have been raised sort of in themselves have been attempts to sort of make sort of genuine points, and they also sort of show going forwards. I think they provide signposts to us of the sensitivities I think we need to be very aware of going forwards. On one hand, I've worked alongside governors and staff at the school for over 2 years now, so I recognise their capabilities and commitment. But on the other hand, as an LEA governor, I recognise it's not my job to be a cheerleader for the school, but rather to ensure the best possible educational outcomes for the children of the community. I don't apologise, however, for talking up the school, because I think it's necessary at this juncture, especially with the things that have gone on there. Llantarnam's obviously gone through a number of difficulties in its recent histories, but behind the negative headlines, and despite the understandable and very necessary focus on raising standards, I've really witnessed governors who care about the school, governors who have been willing to make tough decisions where necessary, to take the school forwards, and above all, really, staff who've given their all and sometimes deserve a bit more praise than they've got. That isn't to say there aren't problems to address, but sometimes the term special measures is used to disparage all areas of the school, and it's not just the case. That's not the case I've experienced at Llantarnam. I've seen excellent teachers and staff at the school who've put their heart and soul into providing the best experience possible for all their pupils, and I think it's just worth taking 30 seconds out to praise them and to recognise that today. That praise also extends to the way that the action group and the parents have approached this consultation, really, with genuine questions and concerns, as opposed to attempting to score points. I think that shows they're motivated, as we are around this table, I think, by a genuine care and concern for our young people's education. To sort of start on a couple of areas, I think the consultations found broad agreement on the fact that we can't go on with 3 schools. We recognise, I think, that the curriculum would suffer under those circumstances, and also there'd be an issue with standards there going forward as well. Not to mention the issues that Brian's quite rightly raised today about the positive things that we need to do with primary schools, and that's only possible if we understand the financial realities and we take the difficult decisions. I also agree that it's right to plan what happens next as much as possible. I think the big danger in situations like this is that schools or a school begins to die on the vine, and I think that's something that we need to avoid at all costs. Most emphatically, I believe that just closing one school and keeping the other open wouldn't have been a fair or an equitable solution for the students or staff at that school. So I'm pleased that this proposal is for a new school, because a new school is what's needed to make sure that what we do is, and we have to make sure that what we do is seen as a new school, wherever it happens to be sited. In practice, that sort of leads us to two big issues, I feel, of where the school goes, and secondly, perhaps more importantly, how we take every action possible to ensure that school has the best possible chance of success. Regarding the site, we've talked about the opinions sent into the consultation, which have inevitably fallen into 2 categories, depending on which sort of school community they come from, and which site people are therefore loyal to. Now, I'd argue the benefits of the Llantarnam site, both in terms of its sort of level nature and because of a lower figure, but at the same time I recognise the merits of the Fairwater site based on the centrality to the learners, especially given the points that Brian and Dermot have both made this morning. In many ways, though, although some people might disagree with me on this, that decision about about sort of where the new school goes is less important in many ways than how we take things forward from here. And I think it's in that area where we need to do a great deal of work to reassure parents, pupils and staff. We really need to do more to create a positive vision about what the new school could be like. For one reason or another, we've not been able to do that yet. But I think staff, parents and pupils need to be told more about what the new school will be like. We need to explain more about what remodelling can mean, that it's not just a lick of paint. And we need to persuade people as well of the educational benefits of drawing together the talents of both pools of staff to improve standards and give a wider offer. It's sort of best of both argument that I don't think's been really come to the fore yet, to convince people that new school can be an excellent school and can provide an excellent standard of education. Because whatever our opinions, whatever our concerns, I think at some point we need to start talking up the new school, or there is a danger that sort of a negative atmosphere around the start of a new school will become somewhat self-fulfilling. So just to close really, that's a few sort of general issues. There are also a few sort of symbolic or substantive issues about how we take things forward that I think we need to think about. The name of the new school, I think, is key. It is symbolic in many ways, but we need to show in everything we do that we don't view this as a continuation of anything, but as a new start, an amalgamation, not a takeover. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, I think the shadow board that takes over, we have to make sure that's balanced and neutral and not dominated by one school or the other. There needs to be a recommitment to work with both schools in the meantime, I think, to ensure that standards are improved regardless of what's decided today. And I think that's particularly important if things go ahead as proposed with Llantarnam, because the school can't be left adrift. The pupils don't deserve that to happen. We need to ensure whatever happens, that sort of consistent focus on standards. Going forward, I think it's also vital that we communicate with both sets of staff, perhaps through the leadership teams, to reassure them about the plan and its impact on them. Rumour that's sort of created around these things is often worse than reality. We must reassure both sets of staff they'll have an equal and fair chance in any new school. I think it's also vital to make sure things are planned properly in the build-up to any school opening to ensure it hits the ground running. So I'd just like to see if there's any pleasure we can give to provide the leadership teams of both schools with any assistance they need with either curriculum alignment or project management issues if these plans go ahead. And also to make sure that pupils aren't forgotten in this either. Can we pledge to work with both school councils, for example, to get them involved with the amalgamation to ensure as smooth a transition as possible? That strikes me as particularly important for pupils who will transfer midway through their GCSE or A-level courses. We've talked about the likely free school meal imbalance between the two schools planned, and I think this does need to be recognised, as I said. And action needs to be taken to recognise the support that we'll need to give to schools throughout the borough who serve populations with a higher level of socio-economic deprivation. The Schools Challenge money is very welcome in that respect from the Welsh Government. And so I think we need to give real consideration about how we use that money going forwards to really sort of impact on our more disadvantaged communities and ensure that they get the best possible standard of education. All our considerations on this should focus on the long-term best interests of pupils in Cwmbran. I think it's unfortunate that sometimes these debates are pitched between sort of images of one side being caring and one being uncaring. I could have spoken today as a governor at one of the schools and tried to make sort of divisive statements that might have been popular, but I don't think would have been either honest or responsible. Instead, I've tried to, throughout this process, articulate concerns so that we can try and move forward in a united way for the best interests of the learners at both schools. I do genuinely believe that Brian and his officers, as well as those of us at both schools, have put forward the arguments and questions we believe to be in the best interests of our education system. And I recognise what Brian said about the need for tough decisions in order to improve things going forward. I was previously more tempted by calls for delay, but I do accept the points that have been made today about the need to really grasp the nettle on this and to drive forward with things before situations are allowed to become worse. But I would just like to see us pledge today that whatever happens, that we take that sort of constructive spirit forward as we plan for the future.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm sure we all agree 100% with everything you said there, and in particular with the way the school have portrayed themselves and sent out really constructive publicity. You know, nothing has been nasty, everything has been really 100% and informative. But, anyone else before we go to a recommendation?
Yes, Chair, can I just come back on that? Just to absolutely agree with what you've just said in terms of we need to look at how we build together now. How do we get to those really good outcomes, even better outcomes for all of our children? So the process I've discussed earlier about meeting with both schools to look at the curriculum and other types of planning that we need to get on with, I think is the first step of that. So by the end of this month, early in June, if the decision is yes today, we will have a plan that takes us forward really right up to the start of the new school. That will include looking at the curriculum, what the sorts of spaces, teaching spaces, learning spaces that we would need, that will begin to impact on how that £6 million would need to be spent, and also pulls together a very clear picture of how the shadow governing body for the new school will actually be, will come into creation. Fairness and clarity and transparency for everyone, I think, are critical. I absolutely accept that, and our commitment is to make sure that happens. In terms of the new school having a new identity and a new vision, I think that's going to come out of those discussions with those staff. And I'm very keen that staff from both schools lead the curriculum discussion, because I think that starts to shape the vision for the new school, starts to shape that new ethos that obviously will contribute to as well. Absolutely starting with very, very high expectations of how we will achieve the best possible outcomes for all learners. In terms of the specific issue about support, we've already been talking to our own recovery board about additional support that we've been able to access from colleagues elsewhere in Wales who've gone through this process, and we're talking to them. I've also already given a commitment to both head teachers that as the curriculum discussion and further discussions unfurl, we'll have to look at how can we actually resource that. Is that something that both schools can manage together? If there are gaps, then we will absolutely make sure that we fill those gaps, and that won't be a barrier, because this clearly is a critical issue for us all, and we want to make sure that we do this in the best possible, with the best possible outcomes. So we will look at those resource issues, and we've given that commitment already.
Okay, anyone else before we? No? Before we move to recommendations, let's carry on.
Sorry, Lewis, perhaps I do need just to move my amendment. Oh, right, sorry.
I was going to ask if everybody's going to be in favour of that recommendation added to the other.
Okay, you don't want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Okay. The delegated powers be given to the executive member for children and young people to enable the retention and use of Llantarnam Comprehensive School site, if needed, on a temporary basis in order to safeguard pupils during building work at the Fairwater site.
So is everyone happy we add that as a third recommendation? Yeah, okay. Is everyone happy we move now to recommendations? Yeah. Right, where are we? Sorry. Okay. Hang on. Right, the first recommendation is to note the outcomes of the consultation process and give approval to publish statutory notices for the removal of secondary school surplus places in the south of the borough by the 31st of August 2015. Recommendation 2 is to receive a subsequent report in September 2014 following the end of the statutory notice period with a view to making a recommendation on how to proceed. And Dermot, would you like to read out the third one?
I haven't got it in front of me. Oh, the other one?
Yeah,
oh, right,
yeah.
Sorry. The delegated powers be given. The delegated powers be given to the executive member for children and young people to enable the retention and use of Llantarnam Comprehensive School site, if needed, on a temporary basis in order to safeguard pupils during building work at the Fairwater site.
I would like to once again add my thanks to the people from Llantarnam School, the staff, pupils and parents who have behaved absolutely fantastically in this whole process. I'm sure this isn't the end, but I'd like to thank you for the way you've conducted yourselves.
Excuse me, Leader, just before you start the next item, Councillor Daniels has identified another personal interest because, in fact, he's also a local authority appointed governor of Llantarnam Community Primary School, which we're just about to discuss. So if that could be noted as well. Thank you, Leader.
Sorry, right then, Dermot, go on.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to submit the full business case to the Welsh Government for Phase B of Torvine's 21st Century Schools programme, which will see the replacement of Blenheim Road Community Primary School, Llantarnam Community Primary School and the school Panteg as well. There are a couple of key issues that I'll just take you through in terms of the report. The full business case has been prepared on the basis that all of the three schools being procured at the same time in order to achieve the best economies of scale. The revised cost of the three schools, which we'll come on to, is to a ceiling limit of £20.5 million, which reflects the drive from the Welsh Government to minimise new build costs, and the fact that two of the schools are now 315 places, not the 420 places that was in the original submission, which we'll come on to in a little bit of detail. If I direct your attention to the economic case, which is in section 5.5, that gives us a little bit more detail as to why that's the case. So originally, as we said, as I've just said, we put in a preferred option of 420 place primary schools. That wasn't supported by the Welsh Government. They didn't accept the case that we made, but instead they've agreed to go forward with the 420 places at Panteg and then 315 at each Llantarnam and Blenheim. Now, we've added some detail in there. We think, while they haven't accepted that case, the Council is still aiming to secure some flexible design approach, or a flexible design approach, I should say, that will allow us to further expand those 315 schools so that if there is additional capacity required in the coming years, the costs to Council of increasing capacity on both sides won't be more than it needs to be. So that means, in effect, that we're putting in an additional spend and proposing an additional £739,000 is spent to facilitate that for later expansion. Now, that £739,000 Welsh Government may not accept as part of this proposal, in which case, if that's the case, obviously we'll come back to Cabinet. But we would strongly suggest we do need that. And if Welsh Government don't agree it, then there could be a case where we need to look at resourcing that ourselves. But at this point, that's obviously something that we're putting in as part of the full business case. So really, the rest of the paper then gives you some detail in terms of the consultation schedule, and it takes you through what will happen next, which I don't want to go through in detail, but is there and is available. But there will be a full consultation process, and really we'd hope that Cabinet can agree today that we go forward and get on with the process as quickly as possible and see 3 new schools being opened in Torvine in short order.
Thank you, Dermot. Brian?
Thanks. Yeah, it does make sense to future-proof the possible expansion of Llantarnam Primary and Blenheim Road Primary to 420 places if and when needed. It's actually one of the principles we adopted in October 2010 to build primary schools for no less than 420 pupils. So this is a slight departure, but of course it's a Welsh Government requirement in this case. So we need to listen to that. And of course, the benefits of having new schools far outweighs any quibble about the size at this stage. But it would be sensible to make sure we could do that relatively simply. What we also need to do is to go to statutory and informal consultation on these particular projects over the next month or so, bring the matter back to Cabinet for a report on that consultation, and then go to statutory notices if everything's okay in September. What I would like to do, as indicated in the last item, is when we go out to consultation in respect of Llantarnam Primary, that we consult on the proposal to vary the catchment area so as to include the Southfill area in the Llantarnam Primary catchment rather than, as it currently is, in the Nankellin Primary School catchment, so as to provide coterminosity. I said that word better than I thought I was going to say it, with the secondary school proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? All agreed? For sure. Thanks very much. Thank you, Donald.
Press this down, yeah? Does that help the proceedings? Okay. I'm a member of the Torvine Recovery Board. You will have lived through the process of its creation in a way that I have not. That obviously there was an Eston inspection now, some October 2011, I think, a long time ago, which found some serious weaknesses in terms of performance, and they returned then for a monitoring visit, and it was at that monitoring visit, I think, that the progress was not seen to be sufficient in terms of actually improving the education services within Torvine. So at that point, there was consideration, but it did take a very long time, I know, which has been a concern for you, around the creation of an Education Recovery Board. And the Deputy Minister for Skills and Technology, under the authority of the First Minister of Wales, did create the Recovery Board on the 23rd of October 2013. And I am joined here today, and other colleagues are actually probably better placed than I in some ways. Associate Professor Sue Davis, thank you for your welcome, and now Councillor Hugh David as well, and of course Sarah Fulthorpe representing Welsh Government as well. So we are here mainly to look at and to consider your item in terms of the 21st century schools, for which thank you very much for letting us attend to actually watch and listen to what was an extremely instructive and I think really important debate. It went right to the heart of our role as an Education Recovery Board, many of the statements that all of you made, but obviously Councillor Morby in terms of his lead role around education services. Our role as a board is to support and to challenge. It's to support and challenge not only on the recommendations of ESTIN, which are specific and particular, and you do have obviously an action plan to pick those up, but to actually work with you to support and challenge you having a sustainable future vision around education services, much of what you were debating before, that you can show you have the capacity within Torfaen to actually deliver those improvements, both at pace, because there is an issue around timescale, around the changes which again you touched on in your previous debate, but in a manner that will be sustainable because of all the elements that you talked about ensuring for all learners the very best outcomes in terms of their futures and securing those futures. So we've had 2 formal meetings of the Recovery Board, but we've had many informal meetings as well, working with you, trying to get to know you, obviously trying to understand what's been happening, what you've begun to do, but also then, I think, as Chief Education Officer referred to, giving really quite practical, immediate support on some of the issues where others have looked at the creation of new schools, closure of schools, bringing in some of that up-to-date thinking and expertise to actually support and work with you. What we do have is a draft improvement plan, but it is a draft at the moment. And we did have the opportunity of joining with several of you at the Children and Young People's Board, which will be a sister board internal to, obviously, Torfaen and its partnership to the Recovery Board. And I think that what was possible there was some really important debates about how we need to shape and reframe and make that plan a really purposeful plan. There's a lot of immediate actions on it, but there are also, I think, a lot of things about creating that sustainable future vision about what education services will look like and ensuring that they're within the context of looking after the well-being of children and obviously their safeguarding as well into the future. So I think the Recovery Board are really pleased to be asked today to join you at Cabinet. Thank you for that. Very much wanting to work with you to give the leadership to the change that needs to happen and happen at pace for Torfaen, as you've very much been discussing to date. So, thank you.
Thank you, Joyce, for those kind words. And thank also your colleagues for coming here. We appreciate the work you're doing, and obviously we want to work with you to succeed. Any members got any comments? Chief Executive?
Leader, just to say that we are developing an excellent partnership with the Recovery Board, and I think they've been extremely helpful and supportive to us in thinking about things that perhaps we weren't thinking about ourselves, particularly around do we have the capacity to sustain improvement, and that's something that I think they'll give us a lot of support with and help us think through. And also the question of pace, and Joyce mentioned that word several times, and we have made improvements, there's no doubt about that. It's how quickly we make them that is the key issue, I think. And we've certainly stepped up the game recently, and I think today's decision, although very difficult for members, was an important step on that journey. Thank you.
Good. Right then, on now to item 10, which is a statement of intent for older people with complex needs. All over the place here. Sue.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members.
Hopefully this report won't be too long. I know we've had a heavy session this morning, but I'm trying to pick out some of the key elements for you. Welsh Government issued a paper, a framework for intention, back in the autumn as a draft, and then they refreshed that earlier this year in January, asking each health and social care community or economy, as some agencies are now starting to recognise us as, for us to respond to that framework by setting out a statement of intent. Hopefully members will have had a chance to read and digest the actual statement, and I'm only going to pick out a couple of things there. But the purpose of bringing the report today is for you to note the statement of intent that has been submitted on your behalf to the Welsh Government by the end of March, for you to endorse that statement and to confirm participation in the regional governance framework attached as Appendix B. And members will know that we've been working on a collaborative basis across health and social care for several years now, particularly since the ABHB, the new Aneurin Bevan board, was established, trying to ensure that we didn't lose the locality focus for us, for Torfaen, but also the other 4 social services departments, whilst recognising that for some things it makes sense to plan strategically on a Greater Gwent basis. What I'm also looking for is for members to delegate the development of terms of reference for the key decision-making groups to myself in consultation with the exec member and corporate colleagues as well. That's what I'm looking for today. So picking out some of the key messages then. It is covering the Aneurin Bevan board and the 4 neighbouring local authorities as well as ourselves. And a similar report will be going to each of those cabinets and the Aneurin board in the next month or 2. And what it gives us is a baseline position and the direction of travel for meeting the health, social care and wellbeing challenges for older people with complex needs. And we know from all of the national evidence that trying to provide seamless care and response and services for older people with complex needs is evidence-based, and you'll be well aware of the Frailty Programme, where we are seen to be leading the way in parts of Wales, in this area. But we recognise, and the statement of intent reflects that the Frailty Programme is only one element of the holistic approach we need to think about in terms of preventing frailty or delaying frailty. So the wellbeing aspects, we haven't really joined our resources together in terms of looking at some of that. So I think we've done well in terms of the Frailty Programme, but that's almost waiting until somebody becomes frail and needs a service. This is now trying to provide a statement of our intention to work collaboratively to focus much closer, much further upstream, looking at early intervention, advice, support, using the resources of the third sector, independent sector, and wider communities. And that joint governance framework that is attached there as an appendix will give us a mechanism for trying to align that strategic planning and commissioning where integration adds value. I want to emphasise that. We're not just entering into collaborative arrangements just because it looks good or it's the latest buzzword. This is about really having a think about why are we doing this? And as I said earlier, the evidence suggests that a seamless approach to delivering care, support and advice to older people with complex needs suggests that we can do much more in terms of developing that in a joined-up way. 3.5 I want to highlight there for you. At the moment, what I'm asking you to sign up to is the governance framework to make sure that whenever we're planning any service change, we are coming back to Cabinet at the appropriate time when a significant change is proposed. And that 3.5 there gives you the assurance that when there's a significant change about a specific service, we would bring that back for Cabinet to consider what are the implications for, first of all, the citizens of Torfaen, but also what does it mean in terms of service change, the human workforce and financial implications. So at this stage, I'm looking for endorsement of the governance framework, and then later on, as we did with the Frailty Programme, when we're entering into that actual change, we'll bring back detailed papers. And also to highlight there, at the moment, we're currently undergoing an independent review of the Frailty Programme with an independent consultancy body, and that is potentially going to report in the next couple of developments to give us some options for further improvement and potential change. And obviously, if that happens, we'll make sure that comes through to Cabinet in line with our scheme of delegation. The other one I want to highlight is 3.6. We're trying to look at how best can we use the various mechanisms for seeking either patient voice, citizen voice or service user voice, and trying to gather that intelligence on a regional basis to see where there are lessons to be learned, improvements to be made from listening to the voice of citizens. And the role of members in their constituency role as ward members, I think, is a key function here, and we need to think through how do we bring that intelligence into a regional perspective to help us improve service delivery. The other area to highlight is, as well as the Gwent-wide arrangements, what we have is a well-established integration and improvement partnership. I co-chair that with the clinical director for Torfaen, and that's where we're trying to make sure that the needs of Torfaen citizens are considered in any proposed changes to any of our service developments. So those are the main things I wanted to pick out today. I've told you the rationale and the reasons why we've responded and delivered this statement of intent. A range of consultation has taken place, as set out there at 6.1. The risk of not doing working in this collaborative way is set out really in the statement of intent itself. The demographic pressures facing us, numbers of older people, particularly over 85s, are going to double and treble in some areas. So doing more of the same is not sustainable. We have to really think about how can we pool our resources, think a bit more strategically to respond to future needs. The other element to highlight there in terms of risk, we don't know what the outcome yet of the Williams Commission will be, and that could potentially lead to changes in local authority boundaries. But what we're proposing here is that if we focus on the geographical area of Greater Gwent, no matter what local government changes happen in the future, that strategic framework, that regional population basis, is still a good basis in which to plan and commission services. So hopefully you've had a chance to read the detailed paper, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Obviously, if Cabinet approved today, we'll start developing the terms of reference for the key strategic groups in partnership with others. But I'm seeking your approval to publish the statement of intent, as Welsh Government have requested all of us to do. And I've highlighted there about the measure of success. It relates to the comments made earlier about the pace of change for improvement. It is something that we need to get on with doing things, and by having a strategic framework in place that provides that overview, both politically and professionally, puts us in a strong position in terms of making future service improvements. So my recommendations are for you to note the statement of intent already submitted in response to the framework, to endorse that statement of intent and confirm the participation in the regional governance framework, as attached as Appendix 2, and for members to delegate the development of the terms of reference for the key decision-making groups to myself, working with the executive member and corporate legal and finance colleagues. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Good report again. Richard?
There's never a lot you can add there when Sue's made a report, but I'll try my best. I think there 2.1, where the Welsh Government made their intentions known in March 2014, that this statement was required. I don't think anybody envisaged that local authorities would be in the position to be here on May the 6th putting the statement forward. I think it shows the collaboration between the 5 former Gwent authorities and the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board. I keep missing that bit out. Sorry, Brian. How we work closely together. And Sue's point about Williams proof, I think think works so well on our footprint because of the ABE UHB, and whatever the outcome of Williams is, I think we can only go from strength to strength. I have got to say yet again, it's a reflection of the collaboration that social care in Torvine and the Gwent authorities has been in for a number of years. I think we're ahead of the game. Frailty, despite its snipers on the side who like to call it frailty, I think frailty actually puts us in a good place to go forward with this. And I think the realisation will soon come to those snipers that frailty is working, and it will form a firm and sound basis for this. I have to also mention in the statement of intent, matters dear to many people around this table is a position statement on, that might be too strong position statement, but a statement reflecting the role of carers in both social care and health. So I commend the report for what it is, a statement of intent, and congratulate Sue and her colleagues around the Greater Gwent area for getting this implemented, something that many people doubted would happen.
Well done. Yeah, any other comments? Brian?
Sorry, I'll just check with Linda. As a member of the Nairn Bevan Health Board, should I be declaring a personal interest?
Yes, I think it's probably best just to declare personal interest on that, Councillor.
I declare personal interest.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Sue, for the report. The part you mentioned about the role that members play, I think is hugely important. As you and I know, and the Cabinet member is aware of, the difficult case we've been dealing with, which involves so many agencies, and trying to link those up to benefit this couple has been proved really, really difficult. A lot of people out there that are still isolated for whatever reasons, a variety of reasons. Our older person champion, indeed our older person's officer, do a remarkable job. But there are still people in our community, elderly people, that are so isolated and in need of support. So we do need to be mindful of that and help wherever we can.
Thank you, Grenada. Anthony?
Two things very quickly to support the point that Councillor Clark made about, Richard Clark made about the value of carers. And also, I see on page 15 of the statement of intent, there's a section about workforce challenges. Often it's been in the news in the last sort of week about the challenges of workforce in some, especially independent care settings, and how, unfortunately that industry seems to be dominated by sort of the low pay model, and maybe the implications of that at times. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, really.
I would agree that there's much more work we could do collaboratively in terms of establishing a robust workforce. And picking up Councillor Clark's point about individual cases we're working on, because policy is being developed over the years in silos, then you understand why officers from different organisations or different parts of the same authority will, unless you really nudge them, work in a silo-based approach. And that's exactly what this statement of intent is trying to do, is to, I pride myself on always personally trying to break down organisation and professional boundaries. I think if they get in the way of good service delivery, you have to do that. You have to challenge the status quo. But it isn't easy, because organisations have been established very often for decades, working in a particular way. So to try and unpick that, to work in a better way, to provide seamless care and support and advice to people is a challenge to those frontline practitioners who've been told this is the way you operate, following these guidelines, these procedures, these are the rules. You're almost asking people to rethink the rules again, and I think all of us want what's right for citizens, and if that means challenging the rules, that's what we have to do, and make sure we challenge to Welsh Government, who very often, it's different silos within Welsh Government, so there's never an intention to make it silo-based, but because the way organisations are set up, sometimes it doesn't appear as if it's joined up from Welsh Government level, and we have that job of trying to knit it back together, if you like, when we come to the citizen at the end of the day.
Lewis?
Yeah, entirely support what Sue says about organisations working in silos, but it's imperative those silos are broken down. We've for a long time now had the forums in Torvine, and I would dearly like to see those bolstered somehow with a bit of finance or whatever, because you know, these are the very people we are talking about. Some of those members there are 90 years of age, you know, and over that, and really active and can give us first-hand experience. Last week, I went to a launch of an online service down at Cwmbran Library called Added Life. Now, that was organised by Public Health Wales, but it didn't seem to be any publicity prior to it, you know. I was probably the token older person there, because there was about 30 or 40 people from all walks of life, but, you know, the very people it was designed for, you know, nobody seemed to know anything about it, and these are the kind of things we've got to make sure that everybody is aware of. You know, so, yeah, totally support what you're saying.
Can I just add to that, the Added Life campaign, just to remind everybody, that's actually for anybody 50 plus. And it is about starting to think much more earlier in terms of your own lifestyle, the changes you may need to make so that you become an older person who is well and independent. You know, being old and having numbers of older people trebling is actually good news, not bad news. And I think we must remember that. Sometimes it's portrayed as a very negative. The challenge for us is how do we respond and pool our resources to those people that are frail, so older people who are frail or have complex needs. We target some joined up resources in that respect, but as Lewis just said, lots of people in their 70s, 80s and older are still very active and involved in the community, and we want to embrace that.
Thank you, Sue. Anybody else want to make a comment? If not, all agree with the report, sure. Thanks so much. Thank you, Sue. On now to item 11, which is the heritage strategy. Christina, Harry.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, members. The purpose of this report is to seek the adoption of the Council's heritage strategy and its associated action plan. Members are aware that the County Borough is very rich in heritage, and we're very proud of our past. It's rich and varied and is really important to the area's economy, environment and its communities. And if I can use Blenavon as an example to demonstrate that, it's set in a very unique industrial background, and that industrial heritage background has very much shaped the area for what it is today. And also it binds the community together. And also through the World Heritage Site, it brings over 250,000 tourists to the area, which brings a significant amount of income into our local economy. We have over 300 heritage-related sites and locations across the County Borough, and they range from Pontypool Park, the Grotto, the Mon and Brett Canal, the Manor. We have lots of them. And through tourism alone, £57 million was brought into the area in 2012. So heritage is a significant driver for our local economy. As such, a proactive and coordinated approach is needed to protect our unique heritage, and the strategy provides a framework for future work to improve and capitalise upon the firm foundations we've already built. The strategy, in developing the strategy, it's been subject to wide consultation with a far-ranging number of stakeholders, and really it sets out how we intend to manage and protect our heritage assets in the future. Alongside the strategy, there is an action plan which I'm asking you to note as well. So I'd like to move directly to the recommendations, Leader.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else want to make a comment? If not, all agree, sure. Thanks so much. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Leader. Afternoon, Cabinet. The short report you have before you today is is requesting following exemption from contract standing orders to request approval to award a 12-month contract to provide the adult alcohol service for Torfaen and Monmouthshire to the existing provider. By way of just some quick key messages, substance misuse services across Gwent are being brought together and will from April 2015 commission services on a greater Gwent footprint. Newport Council are acting as the banker and are the lead, and will be the future contract holder and commissioner of services for the Gwent authorities, overseen by what's called an Area Planning Board, or APB, to which both Torfaen and Monmouthshire are executive members to that board. During this year, the existing contracts that we had in place were being novated to Newport, but unfortunately this hasn't happened due to a number of reasons, and in order for us to continue with the service, we've sought an exemption from standing orders to provide a contract in the interim until we go to a tender process which will commence in July. Following the tender process, we expect to be appointing at the end of October and into November for the new service to become live from the 1st of April 2015. And that will enable us then to be able to provide a regional-wide footprint for this very important service to vulnerable people on a regional footprint. And happy to take any questions, Leah.
Right, thanks, Lyndon. Any comments? If not, all agree, sure. Or do you want to comment here?
I would support anyway, because it's this idea is in my remit. But I think, looking at the report and talking to Lyndon about this, it is probably the most rational way of dealing with the issue. So I would support it without any reservations at all.
If not, all show. Thanks so much. Thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, a very quick report. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval to award a contract and the issuing of a letter of intent to the highest scoring tenderer for the construction of the expanded, improved household waste recycling centre. You'll recall I've presented a previous report to the Cabinet outlining the importance of the household waste recycling centre in our overarching waste strategy, and also the funding support that surrounds that project. In terms of the award of the contract element of that project, the budget available is 940,000. The tenders that we've received are within the agreed project funding, and they have been assessed on price and quality criteria in full consultation with the head of procurement. And I'll just take you straight to the recommendations, Leader.
Thanks, Chris. John, want to say something?
No, I'd like to say that this particular facility in Panteg is going to enhance our ability, obviously, to recycle more that comes from the householder. And it's a facility, I think, which is near to everybody's heart, because everybody appreciates that particular facility being available to them. So the quicker we get on with it, the better, actually.
One simple, the location is where? The other side of yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, it's alongside the existing site. It's land that is formerly owned by the Gas Board.
Right, thanks, Sarah. Recovery Board. Oh, sorry, with... Yeah, do you want to have a 10-minute break? Is that okay? Good, that's what we'll do.